This is the Good, the Bad, and the Wrestling and Tony James podcast. And as always, the bells of justice are ringing. I am so excited today. I've been wanting to do this topic for a while, but before we get into it, I want to thank Three Brothers RC. I want to thank Jose Sanchez Boots. And I want to thank Sinbad's Gym. And finally, Southpaw Boxing Club. These businesses help keep me afloat in the ring, on the podcast. Three Brothers RC, I'm telling you right now, the best place to get any RC products. Jose Sanchez Boots right out of El Paso, Texas. The best boot maker on the planet. Sinbad Gym keeps me in shape and keeps me stocked with the bells of justice. And finally, Southpaw Boxing Club, the only place to get in shape for the rest of your life. Hey, we are going to touch on briefly and get into the brief history of Hulk Hogan and the Undertaker's heat. And I believe it's heat one way. I believe the Undertaker just got hung up on something, man, and he just can't let it go. Now here's a prereq. I am a Hulk Hogan fan. Hulk Hogan all the way. However, I'm not one to glorify or to turn a blind eye on any of his stories that may not be consistent or may contradict or may not even be true. I get all that. I'm a Hulk Hogan fan, though, and when I see stuff and I see inconsistencies, that's what bothers me. It's like Hogan, heaven forbid he say anything, it's automatically a lie. Everybody hates him, and there's this thing about him. When anybody else does the same thing, they get a huge pass because nowadays they are the new standard. And Undertaker's one of those guys that he's allowed to say what he wants. He can do what he wants. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't an Undertaker fan. I was a fan of his when he was part of the Skyscrapers. When he debuted in 1990 at the Survivor Series, I just thought that it was his debut and his character hit me the same way this Tombstone pile driver hit. We're not even touching the chair. It didn't affect me. And then, of course, when Hogan went away and Undertaker's reign kind of took over in the WWF, I stopped watching because there was just something about a dead man that just didn't, to me, it didn't make sense to me. Nonetheless, I do respect Mark Calloway and what he did as the Skyscrapers, and of course what he did as the Undertaker, and so I got into listening all this stuff when he went on his first tour of podcasts. Then he created his own and went on the same tour with the same story, but the stories never seem to match up. And there's always something little. There's always something new. There's always something else being added to it. And nobody's ever talking about that. So I'm going to talk about that today. I'm going to give both sides, give you some clips, and I'm going to give you some information that both wrestlers seem to have forgotten. Now, I'm going to give them both a pass because over their illustrious careers, they're going to forget some things. They're going to forget some dates, and they're going to forget some stuff. We got to give them some leeway on that. I'm just going to give you both sides of what I saw. You may say, Tony, I don't see it. You may go, wow, I didn't see that. Or you may say, I don't care. I'm siding with this guy or that guy. Nonetheless, we're going to get into the Tombstone pile driver that put heat on Hogan from The Undertaker because everybody thought Hogan was saying the sky was falling. Before we do, hey, hit me up on Spotify. Please hit follow. Hit me up on YouTube, follow and subscribe. I really would appreciate it. And if you see this on Facebook, as you're listening to this, hit follow and like. I get a lot of views on a lot of things, but nobody's following me. It's starting to hurt my feelings. So what do you say we do that? But now let's get into what we need to get into, which is that fatal tombstone that really never happened. Okay, so we're going to get started with a clip I got from The Undertaker hated working with these wrestlers. That's right. This is the first clip. We're going to set the tone a little bit just to kind of see, what's going on here. You'll know this clip. Of course, we do not own these clips. We are just sharing these clips with you. But this first clip I want you to listen to, this kind of sets a basic tone for the topic today.
He got the measure of Hulk Hogan very early on in his WWF career. It was during a match at the Survivor Series in 1991, just a year after his debut, where the men wrestled in the main event for the WWF Championship. During the match, Taker delivered a Tombstone piledriver, and Hogan claimed that the move injured his neck. Backstage, Hogan told anyone that would listen that he was hurt and it was the fault of the Undertaker, but you only have to watch the video back to see that the move was executed perfectly. Taker's knees hit the mat and Hogan's head was a good few inches off the ground at the time. The Undertaker was stunned. He just couldn't believe what he was hearing coming from the Hulkster after spending days worrying that he'd injured the most legendary wrestler in WWF history. He asked to see the replay, and of course he saw for himself that Hogan's head never touched the mat. He went up to Hogan and challenged him on this, but Hogan allegedly made up an excuse about Taker gripping him too tightly, and from that day forward, Taker was wary of Hulk Hogan. The men did work together again in the future, but he never trusted him. Taker respected Hogan's place in the business, but he always kept him at arm's length.
Okay, so you get this just briefly. That's one of those multiple things you'll find on YouTube where people like to make who Undertaker hates, and of course they do it with all wrestlers, and of course either one or two is always Hulk Hogan. Go figure, right? So I just wanted to give you a brief little smattering, so to speak. Now this next clip is the Undertaker clears up the Hulk Hogan drama. This is from, I apologize here, I want to make sure I give this to you right. The Undertaker clears up the Hulk Hogan neck injury incident at Survivor Series. This is from ESPN. I think that this is the Sam Roberts guy. I'll be honest with you, some of these guys that interview Undertaker, it's interesting. They know everything. They know everything because they watched it. I watched it live too. I saw all that. I just find it interesting how you can just see by the way they're interviewing Undertaker, his words gospel. And anyway, we'll get into that later with the other gentleman. But let's hear the Undertaker talk from his mouth. Let's hear what he has to say.
Well, that was crazy. It started out bad and just it progressively got worse. Hogan claims that I heard him on the Tombstone during the pay-per-view, right? So I'm thinking to myself, I didn't find out till Tuesday. I knew there was going to be another pay-per-view, but I didn't know that I was going to drop the belt back and what was going on. That came up out of nowhere. But I kind of figured oh, okay, maybe it's because he's telling everybody that I heard him, and Hulk was still the golden goose at the time. So I'm thinking, okay, this is they're going to take this off of me because they can't trust me or whatnot. It really wasn't explained to me what the reasoning was behind it.
And by the way, what a different era this is for you, because you've been the locker room leader for so long, the conscience of the locker room, all these nicknames. But back then, you're still a relatively new guy. So how do you even handle when people say that with Hogan saying you heard him?
Well, fortunately, I was devastated. And I was, the whole deal was, it was a setup from the whole get-go, right? So back then, we would usually show up noon, on a TV or pay-per-view day. We show up at the arena around noon, 1 o'clock. Hogan would roll in about 4 or 5. So I remember getting there about noon, and Hogan was already there. And I'm walking down the hall.
Red flag number one,
right? So he goes, hey kid, can I talk to you, right? So we go into one of the locker rooms, into the shower, right? That's where all the business was always done back in the day. You went into the shower, whether it was to fight, settle, whatever score, it always happened in the shower. So he's telling me, he goes, hey, I got this neck injury. he says, I'm really nervous about taking your finish. And I was like, Hulk, believe me. I said, I will protect you. I pride myself on not hurting people. And I promise you, I will have you so tight that there's no way possible that you're going to hurt your neck. So, with that, we went on about our business. Every point during the day, I'd pass him in the hall or whatnot, I'd get remember about my neck, right? So that's all I got all day was my neck. So we go into the finish. Flair comes down, slides the chair down. I pick him up. And when I tell you I had the brother secure, he was secure. Boom. I give him the tombstone. As soon as my knees hit, I hear, oh. You got me, brother.
My neck and my back.
My neck and my back.
Yeah, wow. I am just like, how I'm like, you have all these, like, I'm what, 20, I was 24, 25 years old. And, I just crushed Hulk Hogan, right? That's what's going through my head. Like, they gave me this opportunity. They gave me the chance to run with the ball, and I just hurt the golden goose. So I'm just devastated, mortified, right? So they get Hogan out of the ring, and, I get the belt, and Paul Bearer and I are doing our stuff. So, I go backstage, and I was asking, where's Hulk at, right? And he's laying on Vince's office floor. So I go in there, he's laid out on the floor, he's carrying on, and like I'm going in to check on him, but then here come the paramedics and stuff. So here, me and kayfabe, right? So I go behind a wall with Shane. Me and Shane are behind the wall, and I'm having to, listen to, can you feel this? Can you do that? And then I hear somebody get my wife and kids on the phone. I'm like, are you? So you can only imagine, right? Like, I don't know what the hell's going on other than the fact that I just hurt the golden goose. Shane's right there telling me, he's like, Mark, he goes, his head wasn't anywhere close to touching that mat. And I'm like, no, man, I just couldn't hear it. I was like, no, man, I heard him. I don't know what, I couldn't put a thought together. I just thought I'd killed him. And and we didn't have access back then to watch things back right away like we do now. So I didn't see it until Tuesday in Texas, because the next day I was in Hamilton, Ontario, defending the title against Davey Boy Smith, or I was gone.
Because there's no Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, there was no Monday Night Raw yet, right. And we had house shows. So I finally got to see, but by now a lot of the boys had come up to me and they're like shaking their head, like his head never got anywhere close to the mat. And you watch it back, you can tell his head never touched. And so now I'm in this precarious situation. Like, I'm still a greenhorn, right? I mean, and now I've got to confront, the face of wrestling, the biggest draw, ever. And now I've got to figure out what I'm going to do here. Like, as a man, I got to know what the hell, but I also know that it's risking my professional career. And at that point, everybody's so paranoid too about their position and their spots, and you don't hurt the top guys and you don't hurt anybody, but how that works. And I finally, I got to San Antonio, and I was like, Terry, I watched it back. Your head never hit. He's like, well, brother, what it was you had me so tight that when we came down, I had nowhere to move. And that's what jammed my neck, because I couldn't move at all.
You're too tight. Seatbelt was on too tight. Got it.
It was too tight. And at that point, then I was like, okay. Then I knew, I was like, okay. I kind of realized, okay, I know what you're all about, and that's all I needed. I mean, but we're gonna fight him, or that was
So,
good.
so this
Okay, so justifiably so at the end there. I'm not taking away Undertaker and what he gets from that whole interaction with Hogan. Hogan telling him beforehand, my neck. You definitely see that Hogan, like, he kept his head from hitting the mat. But when you look at this picture that I keep putting up, Hogan's neck isn't straight. It is jarred to the side. I can tell you from my experience in the ring, you don't have to hit your head or you don't have to hit a body part a certain way for it to be damaged. I love the guy interviewing Sam. I think it's Sam Roberts. Who knows what his name is. I love how he's laughing along with it like Hogan's so pathetic. For a fact, if that guy was interviewing Hulk Hogan, he wouldn't be acting that way. I just love these guys who act that way when they interview people, not just with Undertaker, but with anybody. Whoever's in the seat, they're kissing butt. To me, that just takes away from the interview. I just wish somebody would ask the questions and get down to it. But of course, he's got a kissy. So anyway, I totally get Undertaker here, and he tells some things. Now, I believe this was when he was first making his rounds and doing his thing. This next clip is from his podcast, and he first talks about Coco Beware, and then he slides right on into a couple statements that he makes, not only about the incident with Hogan. Then he talks about Tuesday night in Texas, and he kind of, as if anybody does, right? As you tell a story, depending on your audience, you amp it up a bit. The Tony Hinchcliffe guy, I have a hard time listening to him speak anyway, because the way he talks, it's almost like I don't know if he's just sedated or if he has intestinal issues or what. And this guy acts like he knows it all, and he misquotes a lot. He was on Joe Rogan when Flair was on there, and then he was on Joe Rogan when Hogan was on there. And just watch his demeanor when he talks to those guys. And then he sits with Undertaker, and it's a bash session, or somewhat of a bash session. Once again, I totally get where Undertaker's coming from. I've been in that position where an older guy said, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and I felt the guy intentionally either tried to bodge something, do me wrong, or whatever, and you do have a change for that. I'm not taking away from that. If he felt Hogan lied to him in person, only Undertaker and Hogan know what happened that night. Fine. It's the aftermath that you hang stuff on, such as you gave me a reputation of being a bad worker. You lied, you did this, you did that, you set me up to fail. I believe in this clip he says that he didn't even know there was a Tuesday night at Texas, and it was done just so Hogan wanted his belt back. So we're going to hurry up and do a pay-per-view so Hogan can get his belt back. And we'll get into that after this clip on why we, of course, know that's not true. But nonetheless, this is from Undertaker. It's Coco Beware getting the first tombstone, and then it rolls into the Hulk Hogan situation.
And I give him the tombstone. 1, 2, 3. He's out. Anyway, we end up finishing the match, whatever. I get backstage. Coco is like, he gets me in the hallway, and man, he's just giving me the riot act. Like, man, somebody gives you your body, you got to be able to protect them, man. You hurt my neck. And I'm like, Coco, man, like, hey, if I hurt you, man, I'm sorry. I really pride myself on, being safe and taking care of the guys that I'm working with. I said, I apologize. And he just, he kept going. He was pissed. He kept going. And anyway, it got to the point where, like, I'd apologized all I could apologize for, and I was like, and that's what I said. I was like, Coco, I've apologized to you as much as I know how to do. I said, if you're not going to accept that, like, maybe we need to go out in the lot, and, and figure this out.
This versus Coco.
Well, hey, Coco was tough, man. He's a tough dude, but I mean, he's already confronted me. I mean, right. He's already given me the riot act. He's looking up at me. I'm like, that took balls in its own right. Yeah. And, but he was like, no, man, you just need to learn to be more careful. and that was it. And me and Coco were fine. We've been fine ever since. And anytime we see each other, we hug and everything else. Will you shut up?
A little snug. We're just showing
for perspective.
Oh,
Come on! It didn't deserve all. It didn't deserve all that. Now
he folded him up like a cheap card table.
Tombstone.
You know the Hogan story, right?
No.
Oh, you don't know this story?
Oh man.
1991, my 1 year anniversary with the company. I wrestle at Survivor Series. I wrestle none other than the Golden Goose himself, and that was, Hogan was referred to as the Golden Goose. He was the star, the moneymaker, the big dude. So, I'm gonna go over. I'm gonna win the championship. And at the time, I was the youngest. That would have made me the youngest champion in WWF at the time history. Like Hogan back in the day, the rest of the talent usually had to show up by 1 o'clock on a pay-per-view TV day. Hogan usually roll in around 5, do his deal. So I get there. It's at Joe Louis Arena, Detroit, Michigan. I show up there about noon, 12:30. Hogan's already there. And I'm walking down the hall, just going to my locker room, and he goes, "Hey brother, can I talk to you?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, man. Yeah." I said, "Let me just drop my bag off." He's, "No, I'll come with you." So I go into the dressing room. I put my bag off. He goes, "Hey, let's go back here into the shower." Like back in the day, you go in the shower. Usually means you're going to settle something or something that had to be discussed that was important. You're either going to fight or something was going to happen. That's usually where it happened at. So we go back into the shower. Nobody can hear us. Nobody talk. He goes, "Hey, I'm really nervous about taking the Tombstone. I got this bad neck." And I was like, "Terry," I said, "Look, I promise you," I said, "I'll take great care of you. I don't need, you don't need to worry. I'll have you." I said, "Just don't worry about it." "Well, I've got a lot of neck issues." I was like, "Well, I mean, and he said, "I'm going to do it. I just need you to know I got these neck issues." And I was like, "Brother, I promise you, your head will never touch." Mm-hmm. Okay. So now we have this conversation. We part ways. Now, every time that I see him for the rest of the day, like, going through catering or whatnot, he gives me the old, like, "Don't forget what we talked about," right? He's like, he'd hold his neck and, give me, "Brother." So, it started to get to me a little bit. Like, I'm about to beat Hulk Hogan for the world heavyweight title. And, so we get into the match, and match goes the way it goes. Now it's time for the finish. Finish is where I'm going to tombstone him on a chair. Flair he runs down to the ring, slides the chair into the ring. I give him a tombstone on the chair. That was going to be it. 1, 2, 3. Mm-hmm. When I tell you, I had the man. And the man was, I've given my kids rougher bumps than I give Hogan.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I wrap him up. I've got him. The chair comes down. Boom. As soon as my knees touch, right? Which, Hogan's a big dude. Boom. As soon as my knees touch. "Oh, brother, you got me." I'm like, "Oh, shit. Oh, I just crippled the Golden Goose. I just hurt Hogan."
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've gone from becoming champion till I'm going to probably get fired over this, right?
Yeah.
This is all running through my mind in the instant. Like, oh, crap. He warned, I am just like in strict panic mode. He's laying there. Finally, he gets up and he leaves. I don't remember if he was helped out or whatnot. So I'm here, like I'm supposed to be having this moment, you know, and it had to have been internal anyway, because I'm the Undertaker, and the Undertaker wouldn't celebrate. But all I'm thinking of is like, I'm about to go backstage and get fired, and I've hurt Hulk Hogan on top of it. Right? This is like, you just fumbled. So I'm walking back, and I get backstage, and I was like, "Where's Hogan?" And they said, "No, he's in Vince's office." I'm like, "Oh, great." So I go into Vince's office there at Joe Louis. Hogan's laid on the floor.
Oh, no.
Got people all around him, you know. And I'm like, holy shit. So I'm going over, like, you know, check on him and, you know, apologize and everything else. Like, as soon as I start to get over there, here come the EMTs. And like, it's, you know, back then it was still kayfabe and everything. Everybody protected the business. So I went into the restroom and was like kind of behind a retaining wall that was like that. And, you know, I can hear the conversation, you know, like, hey, can you feel your hands? Can you this and that? And I'm just like, oh my God. Yeah, I'm just like in strict, I'm in total panic. And Shane McMahon comes back, and, you know, he's shaking his head. He's like, I don't really understand why he's shaking his head no, but he's shaking his head like, don't, you know, you shouldn't be worried about this. And I'm just like, you know, are you freaking kidding me? You know?
What is he at the time? Like 18 or something?
Oh yeah, he was young. Yeah. And you know, I can hear the EMTs, you know, they're checking him out. And then all of a sudden I hear Hogan go, "Somebody get my wife and kids on the phone." And I'm just like, oh. Anyway, they put him on the board, and then they put the board on the gurney. They take him off to the hospital. I'm just like, I'm done. Like, I'm gonna have to start calling. You know, I'm gonna call and apologize to Ole, tell him I'm.
You're right.
I'm right, but can I just, you know? So I'm walking down the hall, right? And I just think I've crippled Hulk Hogan. And, you know, guys are coming up to me like, "Mark, his head never touched." And I'm like, "No, I can't hear it, right? I mean, I can't, none of that is registering with me." I'm like, "No, man, I dropped him on his head. I hurt him bad. I mean, they took him out in an ambulance." And everybody's telling me, like,
you're rationalizing it. The chair that's 2 inches higher than what you're used to tombstoning. Yeah. He must have clipped it.
But everybody's coming up to me.
You're probably replaying what you actually did to Coco Beware.
Right. But everybody's coming. That's great. Yeah.
Not again.
Even Coco.
Not again.
Coco was probably at home rolling. See it, son of a bitch. No. So, but all the guys are coming up and saying, like, "Man, his head never touched." And I'm like, "No, man, I got him." So we didn't have, like, I didn't have the same accessibility to monitors and playback back there in '91 as we do now. So it took a few days before I actually got to see the footage. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, fucking head never touched.
Right.
Here you go, Tony.
He was old school. Wow.
You can see how far his head is from the chair.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I've given my kids much rougher bumps than that.
And what sucks about this is Mark has his family in town.
Yeah, I'd flown. Right. Like, I'm still trying to dig myself out of debt, but I'm about to win the World Heavyweight Championship. So I've flown my family to Detroit.
Wow.
From Houston. And, you know, they're ready to celebrate and have a good time. And I can't even, you know, I couldn't eat.
I missed your reservations. And
everything. It was horrible. But now I see the footage and I'm thinking, like, his head never touched. Like, why? You know? So now I'm having to have this, they come up with this Tuesday in Texas, this pay-per-view that they just add out of the clear blue. A pay-per-view on Tuesday. Never happened, but now there's this Tuesday in Texas pay-per-view. I'm thinking, oh, man, this is going to be my punishment. They're going to take the title away from me right now, and all this stuff's in my head, but I'm going to get an answer. So, I'm thinking, well, I ain't got fired yet, but, I need to know what's going on here. So Terry shows up, and I pull him aside, and I was like, Terry. He goes, yeah, brother. I was like, I watched the footage back of that Tombstone. He was like, yeah, brother, yeah. And I was like, your head never hit. He goes, oh, yeah, brother. Well, what it was that you had me so tight when you were protecting me, but you had me so tight that when I came down, I didn't have any room to move, and it wrenched my neck. And I'm like, at that moment right there, and I knew. I said, okay. What am I doing? I can't, I'm not going to fight Hulk Hogan. I don't, that's definitely a red slip there, a pink slip. But it let me know everything that I needed to know at that time about who he was as a person. Like, come on, man. Mm-hmm. And to this day, I don't know if he was just trying to hold me back or whatever the situation.
Okay, so here's the deal, and I do apologize. I think that the clip stopped before him and that Tony guy didn't talk about Tuesday night in Texas, and he didn't know. And you can go back and watch it. You don't need my clip to show. You can get on YouTube and look it up. And he talks about he didn't know that Tuesday night in Texas was going to happen and that Hogan wanted his belt back. Of course, let's talk about that, because I've got a clip later where Bruce Pritchard, they talk about Tuesday night in Texas was planned from the get-go. So if you try to deduce from what's going on, not to take a side road here, but the Tuesday night in Texas thing, they wanted to create what now we know was the Royal Rumble 92, which puts the belt on Flair, which was supposed to feed into WrestleMania, which then they pulled the plug on that at the last minute. So to say Hogan wanted Tuesday night in Texas to be created because he wanted his belt back is a bunch of malarkey. And that was insinuated in that sit down between them. Now, you're probably going to say, well, those two clips kind of do sound the same. We got to break this down. Let's break this down. If the EMTs really came in and they really took Hogan to the hospital and Hogan really stayed for a couple days, which if you go to a December 21st, 2021 article called A Brief History of Hulk Hogan Claiming that The Undertaker Maimed Him by David Bixenspan, it talks about he was in the hospital for a couple days. Now, Hogan, even when he was at court and they brought some of this out of his book to talk about it, he never said that Undertaker maimed him and it did it intentionally and did this and did that. And Bruce Pritchard, which we're going to listen to here a little later, makes it very clear that there was never a stigma placed on the Undertaker that he was a bad worker. Hogan never insinuated that. All you got from all of them is that a Shane McMahon snuck behind him and said, hey, we saw the footage. Everybody saw the footage. His head didn't hit. Now, Hogan may have said that later on, which he's wrong for saying that. His head never hit. But when you look at the picture, his head is cocked when he comes down. If anybody, and then here's the other thing. What he did to Coco Beware, I love this setup. And this is kind of where I'm going with it. He talks about Coco Beware. Oh, I'm sorry, Coco. I apologize. Get over it. You've talked about this enough. Now get over it, or we're going to go outside and fight. What the heck is that? And think about this. Undertaker's had problems and beef, not just with him. That Rene Dupree and even Sabu has talked about that the old guys just had a way of doing things. I find it interesting that Calloway comes into the WWF in 90. They put a rocket up his butt, and by the end of 91, a year later, he's winning the heavyweight title from Hulk Hogan. And he's doing what every young wrestler does at the time, criticizing the old guy, and then the young guy becomes the old guy and does the exact same thing. Triple H did it when he bitched about Hogan and all the older guys, and then he turned around and did it at WrestleMania 19, and people complained about him in his later years before he finally went out of the ring. It happens. It's a cycle of life. Getting into wrestling myself, I dealt with older guys trying to hold us down. Now, I do my best to remember that, but some young guys might think I'm the old grumpy guy. It's just the way it is. But for him then to say that about Koko Beware, and I believe it's WrestleMania 7, he dropped Snuka on his head. So Hogan had a right to say that to him. And here's what people don't understand. They both gentlemen stated that this was the first time they wrestled each other. That is not the case at all. July 29th, 1991, if you get the Hulkamania 6 Coliseum video package, they wrestled in July. It was like one of those tester matches, and he gave Hogan the Tombstone. Dead set in the middle of the ring, Hogan hulked up, and they tested out the finish that they ended up using at Tuesday Night in Texas. I believe it was the roll-up from Paul Bearer. And if it doesn't happen in that one when you watch it, then that means they had a second match. They had a couple dark matches where it eventually made it to Hulkamania 6, and then you can watch them on YouTube. They also wrestled in the World Tour 91, which you can find on the network, Hogan Warrior versus The Undertaker and Sergeant Slaughter. And this was right after WrestleMania 7. Once again, they tagged and had a match together. And then, of course, we know after the fact, he teamed up with Sid against Flair, and they were using Undertaker and Flair together. So they had multiple matches before and after this incident. And Hogan seemed to be fine at the Tuesday Night in Texas match. So Hogan, if he was playing it, took it to the hilt, went to the hospital. I remember when Hogan had his website up, he had clips. And he even talks about having x-rays showing. Now, it could have been from a previous injury. And if you listen to Hogan speak, he talks about his version. And so let's take a listen to what Hogan has to say.
Detroit was also kind of a town that damn near paralyzed you as well, as The Undertaker sputted you outside of the ring one night at Joe Louis, did he not?
You know, I was out there clowning around, relaxed, because you're out there with the Taker. You know that he knows where everything's at and everything's perfect, and you don't have to worry about nothing. So I'm out there doing my normal fumbling, stumbling around, having a blast. And instead of tightening up and protecting myself, I just let my neck hang loosey-goosey. When we went down to the Tombstone and my head was a couple inches off the ground, I didn't have my neck flexed, like protecting myself, and it just like dislocated.
So Taker was actually working smart, protecting you.
Oh yeah, he had me covered, dude. He's strong. When he gets you, you don't slip.
How good a worker is Mark? Good.
He's the best. I tell you, bro, I don't think anybody could touch him when I don't care. You can't even say he's in his prime or not in his prime. When he decides it's game on and time to go, he's dialed in. There's no joke with him.
Okay, so you got Hogan's take on the situation. I'll agree with you. It wasn't on the concrete. We already know Hogan's style of storytelling. Both men can be victim to that. The point is, Hogan is saying, Undertaker is safe. I've never had a problem with The Undertaker. It was my fault. I didn't hit my head. So whatever he said up until that point, he's clearing the air. It's cleared. Maybe Undertaker didn't know he said that. I don't know. Nonetheless, you can tell that Undertaker never had a reputation of being bad. He ends up being where he goes on to in the company, you would think he would drop that, but you can tell he's got a problem with Hulk Hogan. The current wrestling world has a problem with Hulk Hogan for whatever reason, be it fabricated or not. I mean, look at the Booker T thing with Bash at the Beach blaming Hulk Hogan, which we know he was never supposed to get the title in the first place, and all that. Eric Bischoff cleared all that up, but Booker T now is hanging his hat on Hogan bad. Right up to the Real American Beer. Hogan didn't fire anybody because of the color of their skin. If you remember, it was about the time that his son was getting a sentencing, and they had to cancel a week's worth of press tour, and whoever was hired at that point wasn't needed. So once again, It's just so easy to pin the tail on the Hogan in this situation. So now we're going to listen to Bruce Pritchard and his take on this. And of course, Conrad stoking the fires like he likes to do.
But this match is not without controversy. Of course, at SummerSlam, or Survivor Series rather, when Hulk Hogan is up in the Tombstone position, the Undertaker's ready to pile drive him, drop him on his own head, as they say. Ric Flair sneaks in, slides a folding chair underneath, and it makes that pile driver even more devastating. Not just a regular tombstone, but a tombstone on a chair. And I can't believe this is real, but Dave Meltzer actually wrote about this in The Observer and said, Flair then put a chair in the ring, and Undertaker gave Hogan a tombstone pile driver on the chair for the pin. When watching the show, I thought the best work of the entire show was Hogan selling the tombstone after the match was over. It took him several minutes to get to his feet, and he looked really groggy, and his selling was completely realistic. As it turns out, he was really injured, apparently by the tombstone on the chair. After viewing it back several times, it does appear that Hogan's head never came near the chair. However, Undertaker may have jammed Hogan's neck with his knee, since Hogan was hospitalized legit all night long with a jammed neck. Yeah. I think, and I could be wrong, but I believe the rumor and innuendo is that the Undertaker, being a relatively young guy in the business and really excited and proud to have this opportunity just 1 year in the company after being told a year prior you'd never sell a ticket in the business, he flew his whole family to Survivor Series to see this big pay-per-view, to see this big match against Hulk Hogan, because he knew the creative, oh my God, I'm beating Hulk Hogan on pay-per-view for the World Wrestling Federation title. And there's a little bit of a stink on the title win, because afterwards Hogan legitimately, allegedly, feigns an injury and goes to the hospital. And when you watch the replay back, to Meltzer's point, he's nowhere near the chair. But Hogan that night convinced everyone, no, he's legitimately hurt, and went to the hospital. And it sort of put a stink on the title win of the big proud moment for the real life Mark Calloway. And I don't know that Hogan and Undertaker ever really saw eye to eye ever again, according to the rumor and innuendo. You weren't there, but you were around both of these guys for a long time. Tell me what you heard about Survivor Series 91 and what you remember about this match in particular, with maybe that being the underlying heat between the two.
I heard all that, and I watched it back several times, and it looked like that Taker probably could have gotten run over by a Mack truck, and he had such a tight hold of Hogan that there was nothing that was going to happen to Hulk. Is what it is, and
it couldn't have looked safer, is the point. And when you go back
to me,
yeah,
and to Taker, and I think that knowing Taker, he would never ever intentionally hurt anybody, and certainly he was going to be extra careful that night with Hulk Hogan.
The Golden Goose.
You know, it looked good to me.
By the way, look at the tremendous work of the Undertaker here, doing the choke and rolling his eyes back into his head. If you haven't yet, I can't believe I'm advocating this, because I wanted so desperately at StarCast to have you drag these stories out of the Undertaker. It wasn't to be, but the Broken Skull session, which I can't put over enough. When you're done with this, go watch that on the W Network. It's phenomenal. And I know I'm probably putting you in a spot here to betray some confidence as a peek behind the curtain, but that's the format of the show. Do you believe the Undertaker had some animosity to Hulk Hogan for a certain period of time? Maybe not today, but once upon a time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think he did. I think that, you know, in his, just to him, this was the biggest moment of his career. And I think that, yes, he did.
So the Undertaker's contention is that Hogan wasn't really hurt, and he was quote unquote working and shitting on his big moment. I mean, do you believe that?
I don't think that Hulk was shitting on his moment. I just think that, you know, whatever happened, happened. And again, not being there, I've never talked to Hulk about it, so I don't know.
That's the thing. Like, I don't want to believe that about Hulk because you've talked about this before with other interesting polarizing characters in wrestling. I tend to treat people the way they treat me. And he's always been, and I'm talking about Hulk Hogan, so cool to me. I can't imagine that he would be intentionally shitty to anyone. Right. I understand that in the course of business, sometimes business is business, pal. Goddamn, I get it, whatever. But it doesn't feel like something Hogan would do unless, and we've talked about this before, when Owen Hart kicked Shawn Michaels in the back of the head, Shawn Michaels went to the hospital that night and faked injuries and worked the hospital. And guys in the NWA did that too, where they felt like it was necessary to sort of keep kayfabe. So on the one hand, maybe you think, well, Hogan's just trying to keep kayfabe and really sell the angle that the only way Hulkamania could really get beat is if he legitimately injured him. But really the worst, or maybe one of the two worst things that a wrestler can do is earn a reputation as being dangerous, as someone who's not going to take care of you, someone who will hurt you. And to have a little bit of that stink on the Undertaker character just 1 year in, not good, right?
Yeah. And I don't believe that there was. I really and truly don't believe that anybody thought that he was dangerous in any way, shape, or form.
Did you ever hear, again, nobody told me this, I'm just asking questions to my friend. Did you hear of Vince admonishing the Undertaker after the match? Or, was he cutting a promo on him? Like, how could you? God damn it. You've killed the golden goose or whatever in real life.
No,
conversation like that happen?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, not at all. And I think that they watched it, best of my knowledge, that they watched it back and went, okay, let's go find out what happened. But I don't think that anybody thought that Taker was dangerous by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, so Bruce Pritchard himself says that there was no stink or stigma on the Undertaker character at all. You can go to, Bruce Pritchard's podcast. He talks about this in a couple different areas. He talks about Tuesday Night in Texas and what that's all about. And he talks about this. Hogan, when you really listen to all the stories, Hogan never said Undertaker hurt me. He just said, I'm hurt. It happens. If you take what Hogan says, he's saying, I hurt my neck. I hurt my neck. My neck is hurt. I'm going to the hospital. Okay. How about this? The Saudi Arabia match where Undertaker drops Goldberg and all that crap. He said, yeah, I should have recognized that, and I shouldn't have dropped him on his did this, or I shouldn't have done that. And then Goldberg drops him on his head. Do we hear about that? No, we don't, do we? No, we don't. What's the difference? That because Undertaker securely dropped Hogan, all of a sudden Hogan can't be hurt, therefore we don't believe Hogan. Those are the things, that's why I bring it up. It's just when you listen to these interviews and once again, when you get guys like that Tony Hinchcliffe and that other dude, Roberts, whatever his name is, and they're laughing and having a good time, like, you weren't there. Undertaker was there. Hogan was there. Hogan cleared the air. He never blamed the Undertaker. And you can say the Undertaker doesn't have any beef now, but it sure does sound like it every time he does an interview, just that sarcastic, you can tell. And I get it. He's allowed to feel that way. No one's ever going to change his mind. He thought Hogan was trying to submarine him for whatever reason, and he's never going to get that out of his head. He doesn't like Hogan. We get it. Fine. But the stuff, the debris that goes around that, and all the stuff that's added, and when you got a guy talking about, why wouldn't you go up later and go back and clear the air? Because it's not a priority to you. Now, to hate Hogan and to dislike Hogan, that's the thing to do. So now we're going to I want to talk about Tuesday Night in Texas before I wrap all this up. So let's listen to a little clip about Tuesday Night in Texas.
This Tuesday in Texas was presented on pay-per-view just 6 days after the 1991 Survivor Series, which is kind of insane when you consider that there would be absolutely no time to promote the show via weekly television. Remember, there were no live weekly WWF shows back in 1991, so all the promotion for this Tuesday in Texas would have to be presented via syndicated shows. You may think that this was crazy back then, but internally, the WWF saw this as a test run. Vince McMahon had never put a pay-per-view on a Tuesday before, and he wouldn't again until Taboo Tuesday way later in 2004. What is also noteworthy here is that the 1991 Survivor Series that happened 6 days prior was presented on a Wednesday night. Typically the Survivor Series would air on Thanksgiving, but the 1991 show aired on Thanksgiving Eve. So really, this Tuesday in Texas was an experimental show. The WWF wanted to see if they could promote the show via syndication. They wanted to see if a concentrated and targeted ad buying campaign could be successful in a short period of time. And they wanted to see if a Tuesday night pay-per-view buy rate would be as successful as their other typical pay-per-view numbers. Seeing as it took over a decade for Vince McMahon to once again greenlight a Tuesday night pay-per-view, you can tell that this Tuesday in Texas wasn't the success that the WWF hoped for. Bruce Pritchard talked about the name This Tuesday in Texas in his Something to Wrestle podcast, and he talked about how the name came to be. It may sound a little dumb when you first hear it, but Bruce made the point that the name had a sense of urgency to it. This Tuesday meant just that. It was happening in under a week, not next week, not in a few months. It was happening this Tuesday. Of course, it also happened in Texas, so the pay-per-view name gave you everything you needed to know while adding that sense of urgency, like this is happening this Tuesday in Texas. I never really did like the name, and while Bruce Pritchard's statements here may seem extremely obvious, it also makes a ton of sense thanks to how quickly the pay-per-view happened after the Survivor Series, and the lack of deep promotion in the weeks prior.
Okay, so you're probably saying, well, what the heck about Tuesday night in Texas? Because I'm telling you, when I watched the Undertaker's podcast, and I only hung around for the part about Hogan and Tuesday night in Texas, and I thought it was in that clip that I shared with you. It may not have been, and so I do apologize, but it is out there. He talks as if they just made that up because Hogan wanted the belt back, and that's not the case. We all know, once again, it was setting up something, because if you remember, Hogan wins the belt back, they strip him of the belt. Then Hogan and Flair go on a tour, Madison Square Garden and other places, and they wrestle, and people are trying to figure out, is this going to sell? Let's sell this match everywhere, and then we'll build up to WrestleMania. And then they had the press conference, and Hogan wins the title shot, and then at some point they switch it, and it's a double main event. That was what all that was leading up to. And they just had to get that. It was a great way to go back and forth. Think about it. In July, they test ran Hogan Undertaker. Then they put the belt on Undertaker. Then they put it back on Hogan. Then they strip it. Then they run Hogan and Flair. And then they come up with the WrestleMania everybody wants to see, and then they pull a left-hand turn. It's called keeping guys whole. And the whole time, as they stated, there was no bad press on Undertaker whatsoever. Dave Meltzer, who's an anti-Hogan guy from day one, goes on to rag on Hogan about this. And then let me read you something. In his first memoir, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, written and published in 2002 and described by Dave Meltzer, and his contemporaneous review is making Hogan come off as well, long as you don't know much about wrestling history. This was the Hulkster's version of how he hurt his neck. So Dave Meltzer isn't a Hogan fan. He's tried to bury him since day one, and all the marks follow him. The first time I wrestled Undertaker was at Survivor Series. Now, this is Hogan from his book. The match ended when Ric Flair, a newcomer, had been the champion at both the National Wrestling Alliance and WCW, slipped a chair in the ring. Undertaker hit me with a pile driver on top of the chair and took away my title. He also screwed up my neck something fierce. It wasn't his fault. He took care of me and made sure my head didn't hit the mat. But the jolt of my neck being stretched like that sent me right to the hospital. I was in there for a couple days. Everybody wanted to fuse the discs of my neck together, but I decided against it. It would be years before I got all the feeling back in my arms, but 6 days later, I was wrestling Undertaker again in a special pay-per-view rematch called Tuesday in Texas because Ric Flair's interference had made the title null and void. So, you know what would have cleared this all up? If Hogan just would have got his neck fused. Then he would have had proof he had his neck fused. You see where I'm going? Maybe you don't. So let's review. Undertaker doesn't like Hulk Hogan. And supposedly it all stems from Hogan dropping the belt to him. Taker didn't get to have his celebration or feel the way he wanted to feel with it. Now, also keep in mind, Taker said he didn't know about that. This is what I understand. He didn't know about all that because he had to go directly to some house shows where he wrestled Davey Boy Smith. Then he comes back and finds out all this is happening. But yet then someone told him there that it didn't happen. So what is he knowing? What really happened with how he knew and when he finally got mad and when he confronted Hulk Hogan, and then Hogan said no, and he already told him ahead of time, my neck's already injured, so I just asked to be, and then be careful. And then Hogan says I didn't protect my own self. And once again, when you look at the picture, his head is sideways. It doesn't have to hit the mat. When you drop like the way Undertaker dropped at the time, Undertaker used to collapse his entire body when he did the Tombstone. Then he changed it to more like Don Morocco, where Don Morocco stopped at the knees and didn't bend at the waist. Nonetheless, Undertaker is 10 times, 100 million times the wrestler that I am, and knowledge that I am. I'm not debating that. I'm just saying it isn't as cut and dry as Hogan lied. Hogan never blamed Taker for this. Tuesday Night in Texas was never made because Hogan complained and wanted his belt back. Because why would they give him the belt back and then take it away a couple days later? And then he doesn't win it at Royal Rumble. And then the Hogan Flair tour ends not going to WrestleMania. It just doesn't make sense to me, those accusations. And once again, not only when you have Bubba the Love Sponge asking questions to Hogan, which he doesn't know what he's talking about, and then you have Tony Hinchcliffe and that other Roberts guy, I think his name is, they're just happy to be either in the same room or on an interview with Undertaker and making those accusations like they know it all. Did anyone ever think to say, hey, this would be cool, put Hogan and Taker in the same room and let them talk about it? Is it that big a deal? No, because when you do that, it snuffs it out and we can move on. Put Booker T and Hogan in the same room and have them talk about it. Nope, can't do that. Because if you do, you will find there's consistencies, and then you can't talk about it anymore. It's just like the Part 4 series that came out, Who Killed WCW? Everyone now believes that it was Turner and AOL and all the executives. Except Meltzer. He's got to keep his story alive, so he's saying it's all a lie and Eric Bischoff killed it because Eric Bischoff doesn't like Dave. Dave doesn't like Eric Bischoff. Dave doesn't like Hogan, so it's Hogan's fault. It's just, Hogan is just at the point in his career now where people are still envious and jealous. And if you notice, Hogan talks about it, he stopped talking about it, and he has moved on and he doesn't engage. I know you don't like some of the stories he tells. I can't speak to that. He's his own man. But when it comes to the Tombstone pile driver, it was a crappy Tombstone. It made no sense to put the chair under his head. Hogan sold it anyway. Hogan went to the hospital. Hogan's head didn't touch the chair. Hogan has said that it was his own fault for not protecting himself. Undertaker is not liable for what happened. Hogan did business with him after that. Hogan did business with him like 10, 20, 30 years later when he came back and dropped the title to Undertaker. Now, I could create a conspiracy theory. Oh, it just happened to be Undertaker that he had to drop the belt back to, right? Isn't that interesting how now Undertaker has to let everybody know, I'm the man, I'm the guy who runs this place, you bow to me. It reeks of guys with egos. And if you've ever been in the business, independent or pro, it happens. It happens. Guys stage this, guys get butthurt, guys do all this. I could be accused of maybe holding a grudge a little too long against somebody. But if you have a good reason, which Undertaker felt, Hogan threw him a curveball and he felt he was set up and he felt he attempted to ruin his reputation. He has every right to be mad at that. And if he doesn't want to make amends with Hogan on that, that's all him. But I think at least what we've cleared up, if anything, get some of these guys off the freaking interview or off the podcast. These are guys who act like they know more than they don't about wrestling. But nonetheless, Tuesday night in Texas was always planned because we know the storyline leading into Royal Rumble and WrestleMania. Hogan does not lay blame at the feet of The Undertaker. After that, you can argue the picture that shows Hogan's neck is twisted. You can argue that that's bull, whatever. And also keep in mind one last thing. They did some test matches right after WrestleMania 7 with Hogan and The Undertaker. Keep in mind, The Undertaker did have a string of poor tombstones. Coco Beware, which he blew off and wanted to fight. How dare you, right? Jimmy Snuka. And there were a couple other squash matches where when he was perfecting the move, he wasn't doing it like Don Muraco was doing it. He was completely collapsing from the knees, from the waist and the shoulders and compressing down. And then he changed it as he went on. So there's little shards of truth in everything that has gone on with this. So go out and check out that July 29th match if you want to check it out. Of course, later he drops it in November and then he wins it back 6 days later. They go on to have some other matches after the fact. He had a tag match in July on the World Tour 91 on the network, Hogan and Warrior versus Undertaker and Sergeant Slaughter. At the end of the day, these guys don't have to be friends. And because Hogan doesn't speak out, that's why it's always going to be, Hogan has spoken out, but here lately, once again, get in line. Undertaker, Booker T, Dave Meltzer, the current WWE wrestling roster. It's not cool to like Hulk Hogan. And it's fun to tear apart every single story he has told. If I ever get a chance to talk to Hulk, I'm going to take all those big stories, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Why do you inflate Andre's weight? Did you really want to play bass for Metallica? Everybody now, even Jim Cornette, they pick apart every little thing he says and they blow it up. Think about this, though. Hogan's still in the news. He is still, his name and brand is still at the top because old school wrestling, The Undertaker included, will always be better than the current product until you find someone to take their place. I probably made a mess of this more than I helped, but I feel better because I got it off my chest. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. God is good, and I will see you at the matches.